Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening today to Community Chats. I'm Sandra Arevalo, and I'm the Director of Community Health and Wellness at Montefiore Nyack Hospital. Today, we are going to be talking about youth empowerment, and who is better to talk about it than our own Stephen Anthony King, who, I had the pleasure to be preparing for this presentation today, and I'm sure that he has a lot to share from personal as well as professional experience. And I'm sure that after we finish this presentation today, we're all going to be inspired not to help our youth, but also to be even better ourselves. So thank you so much, Stephen, for being with us today. And I'm not sure if you want to tell our audience a little bit about you and how you started all this journey, which, you told me that, and I was like, wow, I was taken over the moon by that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sandra, first of all, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you do. And thank you. And thank you to all who are joining us. You could be anywhere else except for here. And you need to clap for yourselves because it shows that you want to improve. And every day there's an opportunity for us to improve. So as Sandra did mention, I'm Stephen Anthony King. I am a public speaker and author of the book called It's Really Good to See You. I am a leadership, life skill, and social emotional learning workshop facilitator in the DOE. I'm a DOE vendor in New York City. So the bulk of my work is done in New York City public high schools, where I teach high school students, predominantly young men, about life skills. We call it social emotional learning, but to me, it's just really a fancy term for life skills: responsible decision making, effective communication, healthy relationships, how to build, self-esteem, hard work ethic. I have a course that's very, very popular called Millionaire Mindset, which deals with personal development, which kind of was in line with what Sandra and I were talking about earlier. In life, it's hard to manage anything if you can't manage yourself. And I believe that success, you're not born with it, it's built. And it's built through simple principles. If you follow the principles are really universal laws. It's cause and effect. If you have discipline and consistency, anything you do on a consistent basis, you have to get better with. That's just the law of the universe, So that's kind of the principles that I share with these young men. And a lot of my teaching method and my delivery is through my learned experience, aside from the professional kind of credentials. I'm 60. I'm a happily married, 19 years, father of three, grandfather of two, and I'm no expert in any of those areas, but I have a lot of experience on what to do right and what to do wrong. And I've just been able to package it in a way where people can relate to, my stories, and that's where the majority of my lessons come from. I had the good fortune of being mentored by Les Brown, the famous motivational speaker. And he once told me, never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. Because people will forget the information that you may give them, but they'll never forget how they felt from a really good story. And so I believe in that, and it's worked well for me. And today we're talking about youth empowerment, and again, just to share with you a little bit more about my background, I was raised in Harlem. I grew up in a dysfunctional family. My father was an alcoholic. My stepfather was an alcoholic who used to hit on my mom. I have two older siblings, but they're 8 and 10 years older than me. So I really grew up as an only child. I wore thick, thick, thick glasses and got teased a lot when I was little. I'm telling on my age now, but I got called Coke bottles and Mr. Magoo. Some of you may remember the old cartoon, Mr. Magoo. And so my self-esteem took a huge beating when I was young. And couple that with severe nearsightedness, which caused me to have in total 14 eye surgeries. I lost sight in one eye, and I was temporarily blind and almost went permanently blind. And I had my first surgery when I was just 7 years old. So you can imagine, as a 7 year old, the identity crisis that I was going through, the teasing, the trauma of surgery. And back then, in the early 70s, we didn't have the technology that we had today. So it was almost, it was traumatic to say the least. And all these childhood experiences and childhood traumas led me as an early teen into drug use. And I was addicted to cocaine for almost 20 years. And I'm happy to say, through God's grace, now I have 28 and a half years clean and sober, not as much as a rum cake have I had. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so I share all that. There was incarceration at a time. So all these experiences that I have had the fortune of surviving, and not just surviving, but now I thrive off of them. I utilize when I give back to the youth, because I notice that when I show up in these classrooms as a grown man, 60 years old with gray beard, there's an immediate status gap and just generational gap. They don't, he doesn't know what I'm going through. So I have to let them know that I do know what they're going through by sharing my experience. And when I share my stories, they start to lean in, and that's where the fun begins, because then they're receptive and the lessons take hold. So that's a bit about me and how I came to do this work. And it's really, the bottom line is that it's my passion. It's not work for me. I love to do it. I feel that I owe. I'm no longer a statistic, and that's only through the grace of the Creator. And what better way to show your gratitude by not just giving thanks, but by giving back. And that's what I like to do. So, again, Sandra, thank you, and we'll get into that. I hope I didn't talk too long.
No, no, no. I think that we are all, I mean, or I hope so, that everybody's feeling the same way I felt when I first met you. I was so inspired, and I was like, oh my gosh, we
Thank
really
you.
need to bring Stephen here because it's a different perspective. So you
Thank
can
you.
start now, and you never talk enough, like what
Yes, thank you.
now.
Thank you. And one thing, my approach with the children, and I find that it works, is I try to separate myself, and please forgive me if there are any teachers on the with us today,
There are.
but students tend to, you know, kind of, if anyone can remember Charlie Brown and his teacher, the wah 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 wah, they start to kind of tune out from teachers, and not so much for the teacher themselves, but for the information overload. So I try to separate myself from being a teacher as much as possible. And there's a term that the young folks use now, when they have respect for an elder. They call them unk. And I like to look at myself as an unk. They trust unk. They listen to unk because unk is relatable to them. And I think that I've had huge success from taking on that persona. So today, we're talking about youth empowerment, and I'm just going to share again my technique on how I reach the youth, and and I think it's been somewhat successful for me. So here we are. Why youth empowerment matters? The why. Why are any of us on this call today? The goal isn't to make the decisions for them. If it's your and here's what I'll share. I'm a firm believer in the phrase, we've heard it all. It takes a village to raise a child. So even if you're on here and you don't have children, um, there is an unwritten responsibility that I believe we all have been called to take on to empower our youth in one way, shape, or form. And it doesn't have to be the masses, a lecture room with 50 students, or even me going into a classroom with 30 students. Just that one person, that one youngster that you see on a daily basis. We never know what they're going through at home. And we never know who's watching us. That's the other part. And I've learned that just a kind word, just a head nod can change somebody's day, can change how someone feels about themselves. So I'm always engaging with the youth. I'm always complimenting them. I'm always, when I leave them, giving them just one little gem, no matter what it is. If it's just I believe in you, congratulations in advance on your success, something of that nature, because you never know how many of these youngsters are home not getting that type of positive affirmation, you know? So again, the goal isn't to make the decisions for them, it's to prepare them to make better decisions for themselves. And there's certain ways that we can go about that. And these are the principles that I teach in my courses, accountability, resilience, effective communication, confidence, and decision making. And with each one of these topics, there comes a principle, like I said, a universal law that goes along with it. And if I can get across, or we can get across those universal laws, I think even if the child doesn't seem receptive at the moment, believe me, the seed is planted. And seeds that are planted always harvest in their right season. So that's pretty much how I go about things. So this is whether you're a parent, caregiver, teacher, educator, youth development professional, mentor, coach. I've had the good fortune of taking on several of these titles and interacting on a daily basis almost during the fall and the spring with others with these titles. So again, we're the village, and it's our responsibility to help these children, no matter how large or small the number. Right? So here we are. Right? Um, Hold on, let me move this thing out the way because it's just taking up some space here. Okay. We all know, right, that life has its ups and downs, and nothing goes smoothly. I'll just share my story. I didn't plan to have my children. I had my son when I was 23 years old. I was actually still on drugs, and I tell the story all the time that my son was my guardian angel because I had that responsibility, and I guess it was just inherent paternal instinct. No matter how high I got, I never stayed out for days because I knew I had to get back by a certain time and get my son uh, ready for school. I was a single father. I raised my son along with my mom, God rest her soul. But for the most part, I had that responsibility of raising this young man by myself. And as we all know, raising children doesn't come with instructions. So a lot of things that we think are going to go one way, they don't. And when the road doesn't go as planned, how do you adjust? I hope there's some Knick fans on the call, or just sports fans at all. And if you're an avid sports fan, you know that any championship team is a team that learns how to make adjustments. You go into the game with one game plan, and by halftime, that thing is just not working. So what do? Continue to force the issue? No. You have to assess and adjust. And what I've learned with young folks is that that's almost something that you need to do on a daily basis because they're young, because their hormones are off the chain, because they're dealing with their own stresses, the peer pressure, relationships, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome that's going on now with social media and comparing themselves and always coming up short to the people that post 60 seconds, the best 60 seconds of a 24-hour day. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And what I've learned is that these youngsters don't really know how to effectively communicate their feelings. And what happens a lot is they get miscategorized by adults as troubled, as bad, as whatever the case, you know. And a lot of times it's just that they're hurting and they don't know how to say, I'm hurting, or they're deprived from what they should have, the nurturing from two parents, the healthy nurturing from two parents. And that's very evident in the New York City public high schools, and I'm sure in the environments that you folks are in. A lot of times you'll get a child who wants to stand out in a negative way because to them any attention is better than no attention. And what I've learned is how to deal with them. And here's where the adjustments come in. There are plenty of times I go into a new class and, I expect things to go well, and I'm treated like the substitute teacher. They're going to test me, right? And I'll always get, that one or two who want to be, sarcastic with their answers or, just show out to get attention, make the class laugh or whatever. And what I learned, and I'll say this, my niece is an administrator in the New York City public school system. She taught me a lot about how to deal with young folks who have that type of behavior. And the first thing she told me was why. You have to understand why they're doing it and not just assume or take it personally. 9 times out of 10, they're craving for attention. So my approach is correction through affirmation. Correction through affirmation. My workshops are very interactive. I ask questions and I let them know. I create a safe space to let them know that there's no wrong answer. Your opinion counts. There's some housekeeping rules. There's no judgment, and we're going to be respectful. And no matter what their answer is, everybody has to give them a round of applause. And even the sarcastic answer, I immediately know what's going on. Okay, great. And I'll find something positive to say about that individual. You know, I appreciate that answer, and it shows that you're thinking. I appreciate that. Thank you for stepping up and being the first one to answer the question, even if it's a sarcastic answer, right? Give them a round of applause, right? Now, wait a minute. I wasn't expecting that response, and it kind of feels good. It feels weird because I'm not used to it, but somebody's affirming me. Wow. And the next thing you know, when I ask another question, now they want to raise their hand and their answer isn't so sarcastic. And what I've found is that at times they want to now commandeer all the answers because they like the positive affirmation. So I turned something that could have been a negative, and again, going back to when the road doesn't go as planned, when you get a young student who, is not in compliance the way we want them to be, and they're kind of standing out with negative behavior, that's kind of the technique I use to turn it around. And it doesn't always work right away. There's sometimes I got to tell them, listen, you're better than that. That's how I correct them. I'm not going to allow you to sit here and behave below what you're capable of. Now I'm correcting him, but it's through affirmations. It's not get out my class. It's not shut up or you'll get detention, things of that nature, because that's what they're used to. And they become desensitized to that. And, again, coming from households that may be filled with dysfunction like mine was, some attention is better than no attention. So I find that technique really works well really having them applaud each other. And what happens to the other students when they see one student getting applause, now everybody, hey, I want some of that. So now everybody wants to raise their hand and answer the question. And a lot of times, that's where the learning begins. The learning doesn't begin, at least in my situations, with the information that I'm giving them. I like to unpack their answers with significant role play and real life scenarios that they may be experiencing now. To me, that's where they get different points. We can kind of go through consequential thinking and, like I said, unpack the entire scenario to the results and the consequences of certain actions. If you do this, then let's think about it. This is what can happen. This is what can happen. This is what can happen. And if you do this, then this is what can happen, this is what can happen, and this is what can happen. And now at least they're armed with more information instead of just what they learned in the streets or from their peers, which is most times ego driven and image driven. They don't want to look soft, they don't want to look like a punk, so they're going to do something that makes them look machismo and really have negative consequences. So, when the road isn't going such as planned, the choices we make, the consequences that come from them, the adversity that we go through. I share my stories of being teased as a kid, not being the ladies' man, growing up with these operations. I had my first surgery when I was 7. I had 3 more by the time I was 16. I played college basketball. I lost sight in my right eye shortly after college. And, throughout the history, I stand before you having had 14 surgeries in total. So you want to talk about adversity. You want to talk about, again, in high school, being on drugs and trying to function and things of that nature. So sharing those stories, sharing the change that can happen, and the purpose of why I do it. Sandra, are there any questions so far?
No.
Okay, great, great, great. So we'll move on. Okay. So we all know why youth empowerment matters, right? Again, it's to prepare them for better decisions. I believe that's where we were, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me, I went backwards. Okay. Let's do the poll. Okay, not this one. Here we are. Forgive me. There we are. We're on track now. Okay. So, again, my story, I told you, severe insecurities as a child, along with the trauma, along with the drugs, along with the incarceration. And what helped me change my direction was one day I'm in prison and I'm realizing, and I was in prison, as an adult, um, not in my 40s yet, but I had really time to reflect and say to myself, what am I doing with my life? And it was at that point that I realized that I'm not really living up to my potential. Les Brown once told me, you know, most people die at 25 and they don't get buried until 75. And what that meant is that, we go through life not really living the life that we're supposed to live. And you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. A lot of us get caught up in the rat race. We go to work, we come home. Every 2 weeks we get a check. Every week we get a check. We may do a few things on the weekend, but we get up on Monday, go to work, spend most of our days there, come home, watch a little TV, get up, do it again, and maybe take a 2-week vacation during the summer. How fulfilling is that? And I realized that it wasn't very fulfilling to me, and I learned that when I was um, on drugs, I was chasing this feeling. I was trying to escape all the drama, all the past trauma, all of life on life terms, all the challenges of life, and I was chasing this feeling that I never got. I never caught it, right? And when I am in with these young folks, that's the feeling that I was chasing all my life. Being able to give back, being able to know that I'm making an impact on someone's life, even if it's not a child, just being able to help another human being is the feeling that I was chasing my entire life that I never caught. But it's the feeling I get when I'm able to help somebody. I think that's how the creator set it up. You feel good and there's no withdrawal, there's no hangover. It's just a natural high. And it shoots my self-esteem through the roof. And I don't have to tell anybody. Nobody has to know that I've been able to help somebody except me and that individual. And it's enough for me. So that's the fuel uh, uh, that kind of drives my passion. And I just wanted to share that with you folks, so you can really examine your why. What's your why? Like, quite often we say, who am I? But why am I? Why was I really put on this planet? Was it just to go to work? Was it just to come home? Was it to earn a lot of money and, buy fancy clothes? Why am I really, really, really here? And for me, that was my why. Okay. So, 5 things on my journey that taught me about empowering young people. Okay. Accountability. If there's no accountability, if it's always somebody else's fault, and again, through my own experiences, it wasn't until I took accountability for my own actions that my life really started to change. And again, in prison, I had to realize that it was nobody else's fault that I was there. It was my fault. And once I realized that, I was like, wow, I got to change this. This is really, really, really not working. Communication, how I communicate with people. And here's where the personal development part came in for me. Because I'm in a 12-step program. Again, sharing that I have 28 and a half years clean. I didn't do it on my own. I didn't white knuckle it. I became part of a 12-step program, which really introduced me to me. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but 12-step programs, a lot of people think they're just about, the ability to stop using drugs or alcohol. But no, drugs wasn't my problem. Drugs was how I dealt with my problem. My problem was me, my insecurities, this internal void that I was trying to fill with these outside things, and it never worked. So, dealing with me, learning that the majority of the way I used to communicate was based on ego and image. Growing up in Harlem, you got to be tough. You got to wear this mask. You got to do things that you don't want to do. You're frightened to do, but you got to do them so that you get this perceived respect in the neighborhood. I realized that I had to change the way I communicated with people. And when I say communication, it's not just speaking, but listening is also part of communication. And I had to start listening with my heart instead of with my ego and my image. And what that allowed me to do, and especially when it comes to these young folks, right? As I mentioned, you're going to get some young folks who may not act in accordance with the way you would like them to act. They may get aggressive, they may get hostile. And what I've learned through communication, effective communication, is that if I listen with my ego, if I listen with my image, right, then I'm going to personalize what they're doing. And now I'm going to get offended. And what happens when most people get offended? They attack back. And if I meet the student where he is in an aggressive with an aggressive energy, there's no way that that thing can can resolve peacefully. So I've learned how to listen with my heart. I've learned how to listen with empathy. I'm big on spiritual principles, universal spiritual principles, honesty, love, compassion, uh, uh, empathy. And that's really the one. I say my heart, but what I'm sharing is that when I listen with empathy, I'm able to put myself in that individual's shoes and say to myself, they're not even really directing that aggression at me. They just don't know. They're hurting and they don't know how to express it. And when I'm able to listen with empathy or with my heart, then I'm able to stay in solution mode. I'm able to maybe extend some compassion, right? I'm able to maybe allow them to feel safe for a moment, and that diffuses the situation. I'm big on spiritual principles. It's my belief that the natural byproduct of every spiritual principle is harmony. Um, if I practice trust with somebody, it doesn't matter who, no religion involved. If I practice trust and honesty, I'm gonna get harmony. If I practice forgiveness, I'm gonna get harmony. If I practice caring and empathy, I'm gonna get harmony. So, my whole day and interaction with any other human being, I do my best. I'm not perfect with it by any stretch. I'm no Gandhi. But I do my best to live my life by spiritual principles, and that makes things in my day and my interactions with others go a bit more smoothly. I know we're running kind of short on time. So resilience. Again, if things are not going right away, I tell these youngsters, here's how, because it's one thing to tell somebody to be resilient and not give up, right? But that's a lot easier said than done. And what I've learned through my own experiences, again, having 14 eye operations, thinking that after each operation that I was done and I was cured, only to get news later down the road that I got to have another operation, that's very, very taxing. So, there's a kind of a mantra that I live by. A lot of us have heard of paranoia, right? They're coming to get me. The universe is out to get me. There's a little known word called pronoia. And pronoia is just the opposite. The universe is working in my favor. So my mantra is, change your questions and you can change your life, you know. And what do I mean by that? Something doesn't go my way. It's the worst thing in the world. Why is this happening to me? But I can ask that same question, why is this happening to me, from a pronoia standpoint? What is this teaching me? How is this making me better? And when I shift the focus from everything bad happens to me to everything that happens to me makes me better, that makes resilience a lot easier to deal with. Because again, my kind of mindset is that there's no try and fail. There's just try and succeed or try and learn how to do it better. And that's one of the messages that I try to get across to these people. So when students are kind of down and out because things didn't go their way, or they failed on a test and they really tried the best that they can do, the way that I empower them is by saying, okay, what'd you learn? If you had to do it over again, how would you do it different? And then reinforce the fact that just you trying as hard as you did is the real win. And let them know that, you miss 100% of the shots that you never take. So just being in the game is a win. And if you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, you don't give up, because then you'll never get the outcome. But if you try again and you learn from the first time you did it, you may get a little bit further and you may have to do it again. but you'll get a little bit further the next time because every time you try, you're going to learn something new. You're going to learn how to try to do it better. And again, back to the universal laws, repetition, consistency. The more you do anything, you have to get better at it. You just have to. So that's one of the big things that you know, I try to instill in people in terms of resilience, in terms of confidence. I always affirm them no matter what it is. You know, um, you have to. You have to find that one thing that they do good and harp on it. If it's coming into class, I'm always looking for little things to praise them about and build their confidence with. Because it's very challenging, for these youth today, as mentioned, with this whole social media thing that they're bombarded with the music that's going on, the reality TV shows, and this image that they are just kind of just doused with that if you don't meet this, if you're not driving this, if you don't make this amount of money, then you're not worthy enough. And that's just not the case. And I share my own experiences with folks. And I ask them, how are you feeling about yourself today? And if it's not that good, well, why? Let's unpack that. What do you think you can do different? And what I always try to share with them is, outside validation is short-lived. If people are not liking you for you, then that's their loss. Because what I see is, and I'll go through a list of things that I believe are their assets. Because you never know a lot of confidence, all confidence is really, it starts in the home. And if they're not getting positively affirmed at home, if they're getting told, shut up, sit down, stupid, you're always doing something to get on my nerves, that's what they start to believe. And if they're getting that at home and then they come to school or after school and they're getting the same type of treatment, where is their safe space? And I always assume that they're not getting, um, that type of treatment, and it's my responsibility to give it to them. Even if they are getting it, it's still my responsibility as that one person, right, that they can look to, and when they see me, they light up inside and out. Wow, that's Mr. King. He's going to build my self-esteem. He's going to build me up. He's going to help me solve a problem. I'm going to leave Mr. King feeling better than I did when I came to Mr. King. And so that's always my approach with every young person that I interact with. I find something positive for them to do it. If it's nothing more than saying, I believe in you. If we're passing in the hall, hey, how you doing in school? I'm doing all right. I could do a little better. Okay, let's do it. I believe in you. Because you'd be surprised how many young people have never heard that. How many young people, especially young boys, from a male, positive male, here, I'm proud of you. I'm 60 years old. I never bought a Father's Day card in my life. When I get around men who are older than me in their 70s and up, I feel like a little kid. I want to stand up straight. I want to eat my vegetables. I want to hear them say, I'm proud of you, because I never really heard that from a man when I was younger. So you'd be surprised. Your words count with these youth. And, you may not think so. It may be just a nonchalant something to you, but it could mean all the world to these youngsters to give them just that one word of encouragement. I believe you, I'm proud of you, hearing it, because you never know if they're hearing it or not. Right. And then decision making. This is really, I love, and my workshops are done through, again, engagement and group discussion, unpacking their answers, not just having them raise their hand, answer, and then move on. Okay, let's unpack that. Why would you do that? Does anybody else have a different opinion of how he should handle it? What do you think about that answer? And they learn from each other through the group discussion. I become at that point just kind of a moderator of their own discussion. And I give real life scenarios. You know, the New York City subways are popular, and a lot of the youth take the trains to and fro. And a lot of times, one of my most famous scenarios is you're sitting on the train. You know, you've got your Saturday planned out. You're going to go to basketball practice. You're going to go pick up your girlfriend. And then you guys are going to go watch the new Spider-Man movie. And you're on your way to practice on the train, and somebody's sitting directly across from you, and they're ice grilling you. Ice grilling is mean they're looking at you mean. Yeah, I like to talk their language. What are you going to do? And again, you get the kids who go up with the ego and image. I'm going to ask them, yo, man, what you doing? What you talking about? What you looking at me like that for? Stop looking at me or I'll punch you in your face. And again, I don't say right or wrong. I just say, okay, let's unpack that. You know, what's next? If you say that, what is he going to do? Well, then he's going to get up. And then I'm going to fight him. And then I'm going to beat him. Okay, you beat him. And then the cops come. Do you think the cops are just taking him or the cops are taking you and him? Oh, I never thought about that. Now you had your day all planned out. You were going to go to practice, get your girlfriend and go watch the movie. And now because somebody else is miserable and wants to make you miserable, you know, because you ain't a punk, right? You're going to feed into them and their day is happier because now you're miserable. Walking away, and here's the lesson that comes in. Walking away doesn't make you less of a man. It actually makes you more of a man. And again, through the story, they'll learn the lesson. And that's how I kind of go about things with them with responsible decision making. Sandra, what do we have? About 15 more minutes or so?
13, yes.
Okay, great, great, great. You know, I want to make sure that I get most of this in. Okay. So where's the challenges? Please put in the chat. I want to hear from you folks. What's the hardest challenge that you have with the young folks in your life? Is it accountability? Is it communication? Is it them giving up and not having resilience? Is it confidence or is it decision making? I'm curious to see what the chat says, Sandra.
We have a response says mindset.
Mindset. Okay. I think that can go under confidence and accountability. Mindset. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else put anything in the chat?
I think communication these days. Can we talk
Yeah,
a little bit about that? Because, you know, everything through being through social media and all of that is like people don't communicate very well lately.
correct. Correct. So let's deal with mindset. Um, because one of my most popular workshops is called Millionaire Mindset. And you know, I asked them, how many of you want to be rich? That gets them leaning in right away. Everybody wants to be rich, right? But then I go into the lesson and I let them know, you know, money doesn't make you rich.
Mm.
How many people have we seen win the lotto and go broke in 2 years? You know, it's because they didn't have the mindset of a millionaire. And that's where the personal development principles come in. Okay. The discipline, you know, motivation and discipline are different. You know, motivation is that thing that gets you started. It's that feeling, but it's like a really good smelling perfume or cologne. It's amazing when you put it on, but as the day goes on, it wears off.
Mm.
Right? I use the analogy of, you know, the New Year's resolution and the gyms are packed in January. But come February, they're just a little bit less packed. And, you know, come the springtime, there's nobody in there, right? Because the motivation wore off. So the discipline, and you know, I let them know that, you know, this is part of mindset. Discipline is doing what you don't like to do, but doing it anyway. Delayed gratification, you know, and I use a scenario of you've got a job at Foot Locker and you get paid and the new Jordans come out, you got paid $500 and they cost $400. Are you going to buy those or are you going to put some money away for that t-shirt business that you're thinking about starting? You know, let's unpack that. You spend this $400 on these Jordans, that's it. Your money's gone. You save some of that money and you delay the gratification, and now you can make more money to buy 10 pairs of Jordans because you have a business that's earning income. So mindset is extremely important, definitely important. And what's the other one you mentioned? Communication, right, Sandra?
Yes.
Okay, I definitely deal with that again, letting them know and unpacking. If somebody approaches you aggressively, the best thing to do is try to stay calm. Because if you go up here, nothing good happens from that. You guys get into a fight, and then I let them answer what can happen if you get into a fight. And they come up with all the scenarios that could happen. All that could be avoided by you staying calm or walking away. How you express yourself is very important. And I let them know I'm also a certified relationship coach. We use this, my wife and I, with a lot of couples. Anytime you want to get across a point to somebody, it's better to talk about how it made you feel rather than what they did. Because if I say to you, Sandra, what you did was this and that, you can defend that because it's your actions. It's very tough to defend my feelings.
Mhm.
Sandra, those words made me feel like this. So I'm not attacking you, I'm keeping the focus on me. And that goes over very well in communication because it allows the person that you're speaking with to be a lot more receptive instead of defending their actions so much. And the ultimate goal, I always teach them, what is the ultimate goal of you having this conversation? Are you trying to just be right or are you trying to solve an issue? What are you trying to communicate to the person? And when they start to think about that before they speak, more than likely the words that come out will be harmonious and they'll get to the objective instead of causing conflict, you know?
We have more questions here. It says, are parents and other adults sometimes unintentionally limiting resilience by stepping in too quickly to solve problems?
Correct. Correct. I'm guilty of that too, almost. I am so guilty of that. And it's a fine line because as parents, we don't want to see our children struggle, at all. But at the same time, are we helping them
Hmm.
or are we crippling them? And what I've found, and this is more with my grandchildren than my children, right? Because I think being a grandparent for any of you on here that are, you kind of get a do-over. You have a lot more wisdom, you're in a better place in your own life, so you can see things from a broader scope. And generally, you stay right there by their side, but you let them figure it out.
Hmm.
Letting them figure it out, even if it's challenging, even if there's a little bit of pain involved, you let them know I'm here, but you got to figure this out because one day I won't be here. And what are you going to do then? You're going to look for somebody else to help you figure it out when you could have built that skill set by yourself. So we're all guilty of it. It's just a matter of not being selfish. And for me, it's being selfish. You know, it makes me feel comfortable to know that, I fixed something for them. But down the road, it's again one of those things, instant gratification or delayed gratification. I would much rather know that when they're on their own, they can figure it out than me figuring it out for them,
Mhm.
if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. It
Yeah.
says here, what does healthy accountability look like without creating shame or damaging confidence?
That is a great, 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 great question. And a very important question. So, a lot of times I'll have students come to me, with issues that they're going through. They've been punished, they've been reprimanded. And instead of me saying, you know, what did you do or why did you do that? I always lead with, okay, now knowing the consequences, what do you think you could have done different? Not making it a right or wrong, which causes shame. We kind of attach wrong actions to shameful actions. But what do you think you could have done differently to get a different outcome? Now they're processing, you know, and a lot of times it ties into accountability because they don't want to be accountable because they've been punished so much. It comes from, feeling like if I make a mistake, I'm going to get punished. So it's really a form of protection, from that shame that was imposed on them, maybe through their parents or a guardian. But generally, that's how I go about them finding out their own accountability. What could you have done differently? Okay, you told me about them. You told me it wasn't your fault, but the fact is, this did happen. So what do you think you could have done differently to get a different result? That creates a safe space. I'm not, imposing my judgment on them. They're figuring it out on their own. And I'll just be, okay, so next time you'll be in a situation like this again. And next time right? Um, you didn't do anything wrong. You just learn from this and you keep it moving.
Mhm.
So, but that was a great question. That was a great question. And I think that was a great question for adults to really process, not just for the children, but for our own selves. I know I'm very hard on myself sometimes, and I could impose shame on myself. So, great question. Any other questions?
We have one more. Do
Mhm.
you mentor and help others with the process of becoming a consultant or set up a business or get an increase?
Yes, I do. I do. Another great, great question. And when we end, I'm sure Sandra, I don't know if you give out my contact information, but I
You
will.
can do it now if you like.
Okay,
Mhm.
fantastic. You can email me at Stephen with a V at StephenAnthonyKing.com. Stephen at StephenAnthonyKing.com. I'll also give you my number. It's 917. Maybe you can put it in the chat, Sandra.
Yeah.
917-816-3102. And I can definitely help you if you're looking to get into this field.
You said 917-816-31.
02.
Gotcha.
And I know we're running short on time, but we'll close with these three tools that you folks can use, right? Um, Ask before you tell. Again, in situations, don't guide them so quickly. What do you think you should do? First of all, what outcome would you like to have? Okay, what do you think you need to do to achieve that outcome? Right? What happened? What was your role? This kind of answers the question that the person had about shame. What happened? What was your role? Right? What are your options? What can happen with each choice? And what do you choose? And that allows them to think and process and figure it out on themselves. The second is separate the person from the decision. Correct the behavior without defining the person. And that's what I talked about empathy early on, right? You don't want to classify them in here are the examples. You're impossible. Okay. That wasn't a responsible decision. Let's talk about what happened. I always like to add an affirmation to that. You're better than that. Just simply saying you're better than that. I know you're better than that. I'm going to challenge you to be better than that behavior. I always try to separate the behavior from the individual and ask them sometimes, why would you choose this behavior over something that's different? Just get them to think about what they're doing because they're not looking for dialogue at that point. They're looking for a reaction from you. And when you kind of not give them that reaction and you start to invite a conversation, you'll be surprised how they open up a little bit, right? And thirdly, you know, don't rescue coach. We talked about that as the parent. You want to coach them along. You don't want to figure it out for them. You want to coach them along. You want to get them to think and ask them questions. I've been in sales for, over 30 years, and a selling technique is never sell anybody on anything. You want to ask them questions that lead them to their own conclusions so they buy themselves. Nobody likes to be sold. So you want them to make the decision. And how do you get them to make the decision? You ask them questions that lead them to the answers that lead them to the decision. And it's the same with the young folks. If they're in a challenge, ask them questions that kind of point them in the right direction to get the answer so they feel empowered. And, right? Which one of these are you guys going to try? Okay, with one person. Ask before you tell, separate the person. Think about a young person that comes to mind right now that you can use one of these on and use them. Definitely use them.
I'll be trying number one later. I let you know.
Yeah. Okay.
And someone will be trying number three.
Correct. All right. Our role changes as young people grow, right? We direct, we guide, we coach, we trust, um, and we become the unc and the auntie, if you will, or in my case, sometimes the OG, as some of them call me. But it's an honor and a title that I wear with honor, to have because it lets me know that they trust me. And I guess to sum this all up, if you can build trust with young people, anything is possible if they trust you, you know? And I think one of these slides will kind of, this is my company and the work I do. And again, please reach out to me if you'd love for me to come to your organization or just if you need some insight. I just love to help as much as I possibly can. And Sandra, I want to thank you for this opportunity, for the work that you're doing. I see your passion and your commitment. And to everyone on the webinar, congratulations in advance for all your success with your endeavors, with your passions, and with the young folks that you have been called to mentor. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that we are going to, and I see the hearts and the little clapping hands
Yes.
are coming up and little hearts and everything. So I think that, this is one of those sessions that make you feel better, and inspire you to feel better. And I thank you for that. And I think that we can close today, not without saying we're going to have a chat next week. It's going to be about autism, so please join. But I think that we can finish today the way you do it for other people. Thank you so much. Clapping and saying thank you for your participation. And thank you to all of our participants for being here and for your questions. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, folks. Have a great day, everyone.